Let's go overseas now because there's a story that's broken in the United Kingdom in the last couple of days that is quite extraordinary. A journalist has revealed tens of thousands of WhatsApp messages exchanged between government ministers during COVID. And these messages speak to the competence or incompetence and lack of compassion of the government and some of the ministers at the time. In these messages, Matt Hancock, the then health minister, talked openly with his colleagues about, quote unquote, scaring the pants off everyone. The journalist who broke the story, Isabel Oakeshott, joins us live now from London, and we appreciate you doing so because it's just gone 10:30 p.m. Look, people in Australia may not have been following this story very closely, Isabel, but how did all of this come about and what's the reaction to it been?
Well, there has been an extraordinary reaction to this series of revelations. It's actually over 100,000 WhatsApp messages sent between all the key players in the pandemic management and response during the height of the crisis. And what this does is lift the lid on what they were really saying and doing and arguing as they locked the country down. So there could hardly be matters of greater public interest than the content of these messages. Here in the UK, the public inquiry, that's the official investigation into what happened, hasn't even got underway yet. It has no deadline. It has an extraordinarily sweeping remit. And the expectation is that it will probably take some 10 years and well over £100 million before it reaches any sort of conclusion. So for me as a journalist to be sitting on 2.3 million words of ministerial communications,
Wow.
I had a really difficult decision to make as to what to do with that.
Yeah, so if we could take our audience back, you essentially helped Matt Hancock write a book. You signed a non-disclosure agreement. You were able to see these WhatsApp messages. Now, before you wrote the book, you weren't able to read through what these 2.3 million words and WhatsApp messages and exchanges. But now you have had the, well, should we say, misfortune of then going to read all these messages back, and you've decided to release them.
So, yes, absolutely. I mean, I wasn't given these messages until well into the book project. I mean, I've written many books for and with influential people. Frankly, I was stunned that anyone would give me or any journalist the content of their mobile phone, agreement to breach confidentiality or otherwise. There was no time during the book project to go through all those messages. It has, in fact, taken a team of 8 investigative journalists, the best part of 2 months, to sift through all this stuff. So, I helped Matt write his book, did a good job on that, produced a book that he was very happy with. And after that, I was left with all this material. And it seemed to me that there was really no other option but to put it out there. Can you imagine any journalist worth the name journalist that sat on material like that? Can you imagine how I would have been traduced for doing so simply to save the blushes of one politician? That didn't seem to me the right thing to do, even though I knew that I risked being sued and that I would, of course, be accused of a breach of trust.
Yeah, I mean, what's the worst of these messages, do you think? There seemed like, from the reporting I've seen and the messages that I have seen, just a fraction of the more than 100,000, that there was just a callous disregard. It seemed that Matt Hancock was completely detached from the daily struggles of those COVID lockdowns.
I think that's absolutely right. I think that those politicians and advisors that were leading the response with a huge weight of responsibility, a huge burden on their shoulders, became increasingly detached from what it felt like to be locked down if you were impoverished in a high-rise property with no access to any fresh air or a garden, and the real suffering of people who became very isolated from loved ones, particularly in care homes. And what the messages show is the danger of the power going to the heads of a small group of people after they have seized, if you like, an unprecedented level of control over people's everyday lives. So some of the language in these WhatsApps is absolutely shocking. It doesn't matter where you stand on whether we should or shouldn't have locked down. I think everybody has been jaw-dropping, as they read the content of these communications.
Isabel, you mentioned at the start how this all came about, that you signed an NDA. Is it the latest development now that Matt Hancock does have a lawyer and he's trying to sue you?
Well, there has been a farcical development this evening as a lawyer that was approached by Matt Hancock took to the airwaves on a channel called GB News to discuss the basis for suing me. He apparently had told, or thought he'd told, the channel not to reveal that he might be acting for Matt Hancock, and got very annoyed when they did reveal this, only for them to produce an email in which he says, please tell everybody that I'm acting for Matt Hancock. It appears that he meant to say, please don't tell everybody. So if this is his example of crisis communications and how to manage a delicate client in this situation, it doesn't really leave me shuddering in my boots, I have to say.
I would agree with you there, Isabel. Now, I just want to ask you one final question here, because the press played such a big role in COVID during the lockdowns. We had the same here. We had extensive lockdowns in and out, and, there were warnings and concerns. But I feel like after you've released these WhatsApp messages, there might be a bit of professional jealousy in the establishment. A journalist not cheering you on for releasing this? It seems like you've been under fire for some reason. Why is that?
Well, I'm very used to being under fire. I'm quite controversial here. I was a very prominent supporter of Brexit, which, as you know, is a very toxic subject here in the UK. Look, bluntly, many journalists failed to hold the government to account during this very difficult period. And I think some of them are now being confronted by their own inadequacy. There are prominent journalists now realizing and accepting that they should have asked more difficult questions. But I never wanted to be the story. This isn't about me, and it isn't about Matt Hancock, and it's certainly not about me disparaging colleagues within the industry, although some of them have chosen to take to the airwaves to disparage me. It seems to me that we're all asking the wrong questions if we're asking whether I should or shouldn't have protected a politician. What we should be asking is whether the country was betrayed by those we entrusted to look after us at a very difficult time.
Yeah, it's not like Matt Hancock, before these messages were released, had exactly covered himself in glory. Anyway, before he went into the jungle, there were a few things that he did during lockdown that really riled up the British public. We don't have time to go into that, unfortunately, Isabel, but we appreciate you joining us very late from London. We hope to speak to you soon. Good luck.
Thank you. Bye-bye.